Are expensive guitars a total waste of money? Hey everybody, Jace Allen here. Welcome back to the channel. After reviewing dozens, perhaps over 100 guitars in the last couple years, the thing that stands out to me the most is that expensive guitars are, well, kind of a waste of money. Now, before you rush off to the comments to tell me how wrong I am, please hear me out. I'm what you might call an intermediate guitar player. I'm quite past the beginner stage, but not quite to the advanced stage. I could use a few lessons, and if I practiced regularly, I might actually be a pretty good player. But for my purposes, for what I want to accomplish, my playing ability is adequate. I can play with a band, I can play well enough to do solo acoustic, I've recorded a couple albums, I feel pretty satisfied by what I've accomplished when it comes to guitar. And I know there are a lot of people out there like me, bedroom or home studio players that maybe play out a handful of times a year, maybe get together with friends and jam, maybe have several guitars on the wall, and perhaps even record some original music on occasion. So for folks like us, I would say that expensive guitars, actually expensive music gear of any kind, is a total waste of our money. Allow me to explain. Let's look at wine. What does wine have to do with guitars, you ask? Well, nothing really. But wine has had a similar journey throughout history as guitars. Wine has been made and consumed since around 8000 BC. My guess is people began smashing grapes for juice, then accidentally let some sit out for a while and it began fermenting, and there you go, wine. Same could be said for stringed instruments. A bored hunter began plucking his bow string and it made a sound, thus guitar. Okay, that may be an oversimplification, but you get the idea. The point being, guitar, like wine, was made by everyday folks. Then, civilization happened. With civilization came commerce and the commercialization of everything. So wine went from just a beverage people made on their homestead with grapes from their backyard to a status symbol. You can thank the Renaissance for that. Everything from wine to music became something for the nobles, associated with wealth and luxury. Yet us regular old peasants were still making and drinking wine and making and playing stringed instruments. By the turn of the 20th century, common people were living in crowded cities, working manufacturing jobs, and things like both wine and guitars were probably largely out of their reach. But that didn't stop people from building their own guitars, or at least an instrument resembling a guitar, and making their own music. Same with wine. Heck, Prohibition couldn't even stop alcohol from being made and turning into an underground industry. So think about the evolution of wine. It began as just something people consumed. They more or less made it themselves, and it was just wine. Then it became a status symbol, and at some point expensive wine was associated with good wine. You weren't a true wine drinker unless you were paying $600 for a bottle of Chateau Cheval Blanc, and anything that came in a box was terrible, not even to be considered wine.
Tastes like the back of a fucking LA school bus. Now, they probably didn't de-stem, hoping for some semblance of concentration, crushed it up with leaves and mice, and then wound up with this rancid tar and turpentine mouthwash bullshit. Fucking Raid.
It's pretty good to me.
As early as the 1960s and the 1970s, small craft wines started being made. But it wasn't until the late 1980s into the 1990s that the craft wine and beer industry really took off. Suddenly the shelves were packed with great quality wine that was around $20 a bottle. Then in 2023, a Belgian TV show as a prank entered a $2.70 bottle of wine into an international wine competition, and it took the gold medal. Again, you may be asking, Jace, what the hell does this have to do with guitars? Well, the same attitude that some people hold toward wine, many guitar players hold toward the guitar. And that is, if I didn't pay a bunch of money for a name brand guitar, then it isn't any good. Now, am I saying that a $150 guitar is just as good as a $3,000 guitar? Well, sort of. Just like the judges at that international wine competition couldn't suss out a $3 bottle of wine, most people wouldn't know the difference between a Fender American and a Squier or Firefly made in China. And if they could tell the difference, would it even matter? Unless you're a wine connoisseur, you probably wouldn't be able to tell a $2 Chuck from a Schaefer Vineyards Hillside Select Stag's Leap District Cabernet, which incidentally is around $300 a bottle. So when your spouse tells you to pick up a bottle of wine for the dinner party you're hosting that night, you most likely grab a $14 bottle of whatever, and I'm guessing no one complains or even cares. Because the technology of winemaking has made it even easier to make great wine inexpensively. And here's the big thing. Winemakers can charge $600 a bottle for fancy wine because there are people out there that will actually pay that much for it. The same holds true for guitars. Back when Fender and Gibson began making guitars for the mass market, they were dealing with new technology. The guitars were largely made by hand. You needed to be somewhat of a skilled craftsman to build guitars. Leo Fender, however, had his eyes on getting his guitars into the hands of every musician he could. So he made them with readily available woods and made them so that they could be easily assembled. Prices for both Fender and Gibson guitars have kept pace with inflation, but here's the thing. The process to make them has become even easier due to technology. CNC manufacturing has completely changed guitar production, so you would assume prices for these name brand guitars would have gone down. But because they are a luxury or a lifestyle brand, the prices of these guitars, especially the ones made here in the US, have stayed high. And yet competition and the availability of cheaper alternatives has grown. So much like that $600 bottle of Cheval Blanc, a USA-made Fender Stratocaster is not going to be cheap. But does that make the Fender Stratocaster better? Well, maybe. Better wood, better components, some will say better tone, but if you can't tell the difference between a USA-made Stratocaster and a Donner Strat copy, why would you even bother paying around $2,000 for the Fender? Well, it's that status thing again. Our FOMO, fear of missing out, can make us believe that in order to sound great, I need a great guitar, and great guitars are expensive. But after reviewing both expensive and cheap guitars over the past few years, I think that for most of us, there's absolutely no reason to waste your money on expensive guitars. Now, am I saying that you shouldn't buy one if you could afford it? Certainly not. It's your money, you do what you want. But if scrimping and saving to be able to afford an expensive guitar, you may find out that you end up with buyer's remorse after you do so. There is not a huge difference between cheaper models and the more expensive ones. Sure, the expensive guitars have gorgeous thick flame maple tops and rolled fretboard edges and triple wound organically grown boutique pickups. But at the end of the day, a budget guitar will make as much music as the expensive guitar. Just like a $14 bottle of wine will taste pretty darn good. So you're probably thinking, Jace, why do you hate expensive guitars so much? Well, I don't. I have absolutely nothing against guitar companies making money. If Fender can sell a USA-made Strat for almost $3,000, then more power to them. If people think owning an expensive PRS makes them sound better, great, do what you want. Just like I don't have anything against Ferrari making and selling expensive guitars or Rolex making expensive watches. But for me, my Kia Niro gets me where I want to go and my iPhone tells me the time. Do I have a problem with people who drive Ferraris and wear Rolexes? Well, yes and no. Do I think they have a right to buy whatever they want if they can afford it? Sure. Do I, as someone who could never afford those luxury items, think that kind of money could be better spent elsewhere? Sure. So back in January, I felt like I needed to buy some expensive guitars to see what all the hype was about. I had been promoting cheap and budget guitars for over a year, and I figured I should have a couple expensive name brand guitars to compare to my budget guitars. So I visited the Heritage Guitar Company and bought a Les Paul style guitar that retailed at the time for $2,600. But they have since actually dropped the price to $1,999. Then I also bought a Gibson SG which retails for around $1,700. Both are great guitars, don't get me wrong, but let's talk about these guitars. First, the Heritage. This guitar is a work of art. Visually, it's stunning. It also sounds great. Although I was hard-pressed to tell the difference between this and a cheaper Agile Les Paul style guitar. So what are some of the problems with this guitar? Well, for one, it's nearly 10 pounds. I took it to band practice once and my back regretted that decision. Another thing is it doesn't balance well when playing seated. It tends to want to lift up. Also, it has a nitro finish, so I can't hang it on the wall because I don't have the hangers that are safe for the nitro finishes. Yes, these are little things, but it means that I don't really play it much and it sits in the case. I tend to grab one of my other guitars off the wall rather than dig the heavy Heritage out of the case. So why spend over $2,000 for a guitar if you're not going to play it? Not to mention, it's so pretty that I'm afraid to damage it. Next, the Gibson. This SG is a great guitar. It sounds great, great neck, but when I play it for long periods, the sweat from my hands must have some effect on the nitro finish because it gets sticky. I've not had any other guitar do this. Also, I've had trouble keeping this guitar in tune, but it's a nice lightweight guitar. It's also very nice looking. I also owned an Epiphone SG and thought that it was every bit as good as this guitar. A guitar that I've been playing a lot lately is this Tease SHB Telecaster style. I think the dual rail humbuckers in this guitar sound fantastic, and it just feels good to play, and these guitars are less than $300. I've even found the same to be true of amps and pedals. To my ears, a $300 amp sounds just as good as a $3,000 amp, and cheap pedals are often a better buy. I'd say the most important part of a guitar is the neck and the fretwork. Is it easy to play? Is the action set right? And then the pickups. Sparsely wound, cheap pickups will sound thin and tinny and be really microphonic and noisy. Then, of course, the amp or the modeler that you plug the guitar into will also affect the tone. So finally, there will always be gatekeepers and snobs in any hobby or pursuit. That's just how it is. Humans are very competitive creatures. We tend to want to one-up everyone else. If we spend $1,500 on a guitar, we want that purchase to be justified. We don't want someone who spent $200 on a guitar telling us that theirs is just as good. Conversely, if we spend $200 on a guitar, we don't want someone who spent $2,000 telling us our guitar is cheap firewood. I'm not sure why there continues to be a debate about this, but the comments section on some of my videos tells me that the debate is still alive and well. But I say to you, don't give in to the hype. Find a guitar within your budget, spend an amount you're comfortable with, and get a guitar that most importantly feels good to play, that is well made. Pickups and tuners can always be upgraded later, but the neck and fretwork are probably the most important. And if you think it sounds good, it is good. So there you have it, friends. Don't waste your money. Just like wine, great guitars come in all price ranges, and sometimes the cheapest guitar can even rival the most expensive brands. Thanks for watching. We'll see you again next time.